And you are live.
Hopefully it works. Remember, for a while I would like snap to keep the sound in my box to make it work. So hopefully it's still. Don't you ever think of me when you're outside strolling? Don't you ever wait? All right. Hello and welcome to another edition of God Ween Evan on the Infernet. I am Paul Gutkowski. As always, is the man on my left in my square, in my box, in my heart, Will Nunziata.
Oh, thanks, buddy. Hey, lock the gates. We have another interview today. It's been a while since I copied Mark Maron.
We're God Ween Evan. For those of you who are joining us to see or hear Hank Shteamer, we're going to bring him on in just a moment. But if you've never heard of our show, if you're tuning in for the first time, God Ween Evan is a podcast. We're on the Osiris Media podcasting network. And it started as myself, Will, another one of our friends, Katie Hartman, all lifelong diehard Ween fans. And we had a friend named Evan who in kind of casual conversation over the years, it became clear that he didn't like Ween, and he should have liked Ween because he was funny. He's charming. He has a great sense of humor. He loves music, and he had this kind of rigid, death grip like grasp on his distaste for Ween, which we would learn came from childhood trauma, self-inflicted. And we have spent the last 17 years
that's what it feels like,
trying to get him to like Ween, and we kind of did. If you're tuning in for the first time, listen to the first season. Great, it's great. Everything after that, take or leave. Just kidding. Over the last year, we've started doing these interviews. Will, do you want to talk about these interviews?
Yeah, we've been finding everybody that's connected to the Ween world in some way. We interviewed it. All right.
We interviewed it into lots of people.
Yeah. Been quarantined for too long. Kirk Miller, their longtime sound engineer. Chris Tomato Hoffernes from Sound of Urchin. We've interviewed Ashton Freeman. A couple weeks ago, we interviewed Eric Slick from Dr. Dog.
You interviewed Ben Vaughn.
Oh my God, Ben Vaughn,
which was one of my favorite. Will, that's my favorite episode of God Ween Evan. I want you to know.
Thank you very much. I was very nervous for that one. And today, we are interviewing somebody that it was probably the first person that I reached out to, like 3 or 4 years ago, way too soon in our podcast to start looking for guests. And I interviewed, we were looking for the one, the only Hank Shteamer, who wrote the book on Ween. And it took a quarantine, but we got him. And we're going to chat Ween. We're going to chat music. We're going to chat rock and roll. We're going to chat Rolling Stone. It's going to be great.
Yeah. So let's go
bring him in.
Bring him in. Yeah. Ladies and gentlemen, put your hands together for Hank Shteamer.
Hey guys.
Hey bud.
Welcome to God Ween Evan. Thanks for doing this, man.
Oh yeah, no problem. Thanks a lot for having me. It's a nice distraction with everything going on. Yeah.
That's really what our whole podcast is, just a distraction.
Yeah. So Hank, I want to start with a question that you've been asking some of the musicians that you've been interviewing in your Rolling Stone pieces of late. What are you doing with your unexpected time home?
Man, that's a good question. A few things. So I took up guitar, I'd say like about 2.5 years ago. So I've been playing a lot. Also I have this this is sort of too much information, but I have this like hip injury ongoing that I'm a drummer of like 25 years. But the hip injury is preventing me from doing much exercise, doing much drumming, doing much anything like that. So it's kind of like the options are kind of whittled down. So it's more the guitar, and I'm playing. I took a video lesson the other night. Just kind of like trying to stay busy with that when I can. And then, my girlfriend and I were, cooking, and, we bought this big puzzle that we've been doing. We the other night I found myself doing like very cliched, like decompression type activities. Like we were doing a puzzle and like listening to the Dead, which it's not necessarily like.
Can I come over, or do you guys?
But yeah, I realized I had a copy of that famous May '77 Dead box, which like I like the Dead. I feel like I'm one of the rare, like, because most people are like, oh, I can't stand them, or I'm obsessed with them, and I'm like, I like them. The 5 or 10 shows I've heard or records I've heard I really like, but I haven't gone super deep. So I just decided to pull out that May '77 box, and it's been nice just to kind of like zone out on that. I started watching the documentary, and I'm reading the book that came with the '77 box, which is like one book just about that Cornell show, which is kind of crazy. Those are, I guess, some of the things I'm starting up with,
That doc is pretty serious. It's a pretty serious. I watched it like pretty much. I mean, how many hours is it? It's super long. The Long Strange Trip one.
I don't know.
It's incredible. I don't want to spoil it. There's a part, I wept like a child. There's a part about deaf concert goers. Have you gotten to that part yet?
No, I'm probably honestly only like.
I don't want to spoil it, but there's a.
Be prepared to cry.
Yeah, I cry. I'm an easy cry, but yeah, it's funny you mentioned puzzles. I'm actually, we're at my parents' house in Jersey, and my wife and I, and like my dad's a big puzzler, and he's got this. He actually bought a big like felt. It looks like a pool table kind of, but it's for puzzle.
Puzzle table.
He's got a puzzle table, and it's got a Lazy Susan. I mean, this is fucking serious puzzling.
That's intense, yeah.
And he was doing this like 30,000. I don't know how many pieces are on this thing. It's actually it's all mollusk themed. It's all like sea.
Oh wow.
Yeah, and like the I don't know, like the 7th day we were here, my wife had a bit of a breakdown just about like everything that was happening, and she kept it was right on like the living room table. She kept bumping it and like hitting the Lazy Susan, and she finally, in the middle of the night, she woke up in the middle of the night. She doesn't sleep great. She was just like started cleaning, and she came and she just took the fucking table and dumped the whole puzzle back into the box and moved the table into the basement. And like at least 4 or 5 times since March 13th, my dad has asked about, hey, have you guys been working on the puzzle? Like, don't have the heart to tell him it's in a box in the basement.
Yeah.
So Hank, where are you from? How'd you get your start? Let's start a little bit at the beginning.
I'm from Kansas City. I'm from a suburb of Kansas City, Missouri, that happens to lie in Kansas. It's kind of confusing because the state line is like in the middle of town, so you would kind of be in both states. But yeah, Kansas City basically.
Which side of Kansas City is better, the Missouri side or the Kansas City?
Well, when people talk about Kansas City, they're mainly talking about Kansas City, Missouri. That's like the bigger, more well-known city. But yeah,
is that where the Royals and the Chiefs are?
Yeah, it's all that. Yeah, but yeah, I'm just from a pretty fairly generic suburb. Probably not that different than suburbs a lot of other places. But yeah, that's where I'm from. Grew up there. Yeah.
And what started you on your journey to become senior music editor at Rolling Stone?
Well, I guess, music was just always sort of an obsession. I went through a few things. You're young and you go through different little phases. I was definitely, super into, whatever it was, like dinosaurs, and then video games, and then like pro wrestling and all this stuff you go through when you're a kid. But I feel like at a certain point, like in maybe around 12, 13, like music sort of took hold and kind of like pushed all other interests to the side. I had friends who were playing music like as teenagers. They were like already very accomplished guitar players, and and then sort of like this kind of metal thing started to happen. Like when I was really young, I was into Def Leppard and Guns N' Roses and Poison.
Did you have a classic rock Christmas or holiday? I feel like everybody has It was like when you're like 12 or 13, you get like Electric Ladyland and the Doors double disc.
You know, it's
Yeah.
funny because my musical like engagement was very backwards. Like classic rock, you know, my parents played me the Beatles and stuff, but to be honest, like I was just backwards with all of it. I got very into hair metal when that was happening, and then Metallica. The Metallica, the Black Album, you know, 91 was like, I guess I would have been 13. And that was when it turned into something different. That was when it like sort of just took over my life. And, you know, I can remember like walking around, you know, I used to have those Discman CD Walkman things and a little case where it fit like 5 or 6 CDs. And I would just walk around. It was only like the 5 at the time, Metallica CDs. So metal just became like this big thing. My friends were getting into playing metal and punk, you know, and just sort of I basically sort of in high school just moved sequentially through like the heavier and heavier stuff. Like I got, you know, pretty quickly from like Metallica, you know, then all the grunge stuff started to happen, but I got very into like, within a couple of years, I was into like death metal.
Like Cannibal Corpse?
Yeah, like Cannibal Corpse, Morbid Angel, Deicide, Obituary. And then, you know, I mean, then
all the other fonts that you can't read.
Yeah, just dozens of other bands. You know, that was just like I kind of was just kept looking for the next most extreme thing or something. And then, you know, I got into there was a lot of indie noise rock, you know, post-hardcore, all kinds of stuff happening around Kansas City in the Midwest. And I got super into a lot of that more stuff that I could go see, and there would be like 20 people at the show. It was more of like a DIY kind of vibe, but it was all like heavy, you know. I was very into the heavy stuff. And then
did any of those bands did any of those bands from that time make it?
Well, you know, I think that's kind of a relative term. I mean, some of these bands were, like, you know, it was kind of these bands that might have had like one album on a major label. There was a band from Kansas City called Season to Risk that was, you know, they had like one album on like I think it was a co-release of Columbia or something. But like it was a lot of pretty like, you know, some bands that would be on like Discord, like Fugazi's label, you know, I got really into that stuff. It's just like those exploring the whole, you know, Jesus Lizard, just the whole, it was kind of like the metal stuff over here, and then being like, oh, there's a lot of heavy stuff that's not necessarily quote unquote metal, but it's just as intense if you go see it live. And you can go see that stuff in the early 90s in like a small club. And I got super into that. And I also started playing drums around that time, kind of self-taught, kind of with pointers from my friends. But, you know, I guess it was one of these things where it's like the music obsession started then, and it just sort of like, even though I was doing different stuff, it just sort of never stopped. And then like when I got to college, I went to Columbia, and they have a really good jazz station. And I had been sort of into jazz, and there at Columbia, I got super into jazz. That sort of like, I kind of fell down that rabbit hole because it was just a real good place to like educate myself. And you could sort of walk through the stacks and hundreds of LPs, and you could check stuff out. And, you know, there was a lot of like this guy, Phil Schaff, who's one of the world's foremost like Charlie Parker experts. He had like the show after me. So it was kind of just like, and you know, the metal stuff never stopped or anything. That was always there. But I just got, you know, I just kind of fell super into that jazz stuff. And I feel like I was relating to it because, you know, been a drummer, you know, both those kinds of music, like there's a high premium on, you know, great drummers in both styles, like a high premium placed on just like, you know, getting super into how how different musicians sound and how they work together. You know, I never really thought of it that differently. It was more like, you know, if I like the Jesus Lizard and I like the way that like the rhythm section of the Jesus Lizard sounds, it wasn't that different than I like the way the rhythm section of this Miles band sounds. You know, it was kind of like, I just liked great players in whatever medium, you know what I mean? And, you know, I was writing a little bit like in, you know, like kind of these middle school paper things. I wasn't writing that seriously in high school. And then like starting around college, I started to get some like freelance gigs or something. I was writing for just different jazz websites. The sort of the jazz scene that I was involved in is very like, you know, it wasn't like 2 weeks before you felt like you sort of met all these different people in that scene. There was kind of this, there was a festival called the Vision Festival happening in New York that still goes on. But, you know, through the station, I volunteered at that, met a lot of people, and was just sort of meeting different people in that jazz community, finding out there were small publications that needed people to go out and review shows and stuff. So that kind of started happening from there. And then from there, I started pitching places like the All Music Guide, you know, like allmusic.com. At that time, they were allowing, you know, they kind of, you could pitch them as a freelancer and be like, I want to review such and such record that's not in your database, and you know, and you could get paid to do that,
Great.
which was incredible. You know, different stuff like that. You know, there's a publication called All About Jazz. You know, publication called Signal to Noise. This is all like in college and like the couple years after college, you know, just finding out
were you sticking around in New York after Columbia?
Yeah, I never left. So I got here in 1998, and I've you know, I go home to see my family and stuff, but I've never lived anywhere else since, you know, for the past, I guess like around 20 years or more.
Yeah. It makes me think of like when you're talking about like that intersection between like jazz and or just like noise too, and like it makes me think of like seeing John Zorn at like Tonic or something back in the or like the opening drums for Tortoise Standards on like that just like it's like that it's like it's not you know, it's not metal, but it still has that same like there's just a fucking driving energy to it, or just a noise that like you kind of drowned yourself out in.
Well, I think too, and maybe this wasn't happening so much at the time, but I think now, you know, it's like, I'm sort of I feel like sort of my tastes are kind of old school in the sense that like, I think having grown up in the era of like, you know, my friends playing in this almost like garage band, and, you know, like I still, you know, and I'll probably always be oriented this way, even though I like a lot of electronic music and all different types of stuff like that. But like in general, my orientation towards like musical aesthetics or something, it's really oriented around like bands. You know what I mean? Like, you know, and I'm not trying to make some like hierarchy about like, you know, like a person playing electronic music is like somehow like not on the same level or something, but it's just like my own engagement with music. It seems to really gravitate towards like bands. You know what I mean? And like, and it's not as much genre specific, but I like, you know, this person has this sound, this person has this sound, and they're interacting to create this like organism of, you know, like we were talking about the Dead before, or something like that. It's like, I like the idea of this band as like a collection of musical personalities that fits together. And like, that's a constant through any kind of jazz and any kind of rock, whether
it kind of goes back to puzzles. You know, when it connects perfectly like a puzzle, man, it's a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
I love bands. Yeah. I love bands that have like, and they have like that's a lot of times where the players even seem like strange bedfellows in some ways. Like, and going back to the Dead, I mean, like Pigpen and the Dead, or like, you know, that I feel like you get guys that just like, it doesn't look like they would necessarily walk down the street together, but you put them in the same room and they create something. You know.
Yeah, it's super weird. Yeah, like I was watching some video. I think the Dead has been putting up these videos of them during the quarantine. They're putting up some old live videos. There's one of them in, I think it was 72, like the Beat Club in Germany.
Yeah, the one from it was the one they did this past Friday. Yeah.
Yeah, I just threw that on, and I was just like, I mean, I could not take my eyes off Phil Lesh. I was like, man, that guy is just like, what a character, and like what a strange presence. You know, I love to me, I kind of have this thing about, like, people talk about like, I don't know. This is kind of like I'm probably getting way off the Ween topic, but like,
right. We got time.
I'll get you back. Don't worry.
I have this idea of like punk or something. Like, people often think of it as like a genre, and like thinking about, you know, they because I'm super into a lot of like real slick music, like whether that's like Steely Dan or a lot of like jazz fusion stuff, and also super punk, like raw, like, you know, whether that's like the Stooges or the Misfits or, you know, on down the line. And like, to me, like I sort of developed this idea of like punk as a thing of like, when I think about it in my head, I just think about someone being like super themselves. You know what I mean?
100%.
Like I don't really, and if being yourself means to be like to be like Jocko and you're like just like absolutely just like, you know, like massacring your instrument and just sort of like if virtuosity is you and that's how you can like best, you know, tackle, you know, music or come at music or that's what speaks to you, then that's like and you know, so to me like Steely Dan is like more punk than like a generic punk band. Do you know what I'm saying? Because
Totally.
it's like to them, you know, the ultimate, like I always say this, like I like music that just goes really far in whatever direction it chooses to go in, and without judging what direction that might be. You know what I'm saying? Like it's like, you know, whether that's like, you know, Steely Dan on one hand, or you know, there's this sort of black metal band called Revenge, which is sort of like the most kind of like grotesque, blown out, just just it's just kind of like vile sounding music, you know. It's just it's super, it's like nihilistic in its objectives, you know. And so, you know, and whether that, you know, like I listen to a lot of like, you know, lately I've been listening to a ton of Pat Metheny, like just getting super into that. And like to me, like, you know, there's kind of like this glossiness to some of that and you know, verging on what some people might even call like smooth jazz or something. But to me, he's such like a punk figure because it's like he just sort of does what he pleases. And like that might be, you know, he's got the record with Ornette Coleman, which is like super kind of like, you know, very kind of like out there and off the wall. And some of the stuff is very, you know, placid and just sort of like gorgeous. And I don't know, I like these musicians who are just like, and I guess I just like, I don't think of things in terms of the style, you know what I mean? It's more just like what is like the spirit coming, because there's so much, you know, like being a person who really likes metal, there's a ton of metal that it doesn't have that, like there's some kind of spark that has to have, like earlier
it's
today,
metal for metal's sake as opposed to this is what I wanted to create.
Right. And people get in this thing of like, oh, I'm a doom metal band, or I'm a like get super into the subgenre thing. And it's like, it's I don't know, like I was watching a live stream earlier today of Crowbar, who's one of my favorite metal bands. I don't know if you guys are familiar with them, like this New Orleans metal band. And they're very like soulful, emotional, sort of like, you know, there's just a great sense of like catharsis with their music. And like they just happen to like speak to me. But there's a lot of bands in their kind of like subgenre that, you know, people sometimes call them like doom metal or sludge metal or things like that. And it's like, I don't really like, I do gravitate towards certain styles of music, but like I would never like something because it's that. It has to have like that underneath layer.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like
I love the idea of like of punk being somewhat like synonymous with like truth, or just like if punk, the idea of punk is to cut through bullshit. You know, if like punk is like, it was a rejection of bullshit, then like or pretense, then like then yeah, Steely Dan is punk. It's you know, it's like if it's I love that idea. I think
because punk itself, like it's like if you think about like you know, these like, you know, nth generation bands who sound like Bad Religion or something like that, and it's like the copy of a copy of a copy of a punk band. Is that rebelling against anything? You know what I'm saying? No. Like it's, and the same thing with the metal band who, you know, the guys getting up with like the leather and the spikes like 35 years after Slayer, like was truly shocking. You know what I mean? Like it you know, it and so, you know, I find myself like pulling in a lot of different directions musically, because it's like, I don't want to hear that like copy of a copy of a copy thing. You know what I mean? Because I'm very wary of that idea that like somehow these genres are like you can't just like, you know, put on a costume of a genre and like act like you're like embodying what it meant to see like Black Flag or the Dead Kennedys or Minor Threat, or you know what I mean? Like this stuff is really kind of sacred, and you're doing it a disservice by like, you know, like someone like Ian MacKaye or something like that, where it's like, you know, to say like, well, okay, we did Minor Threat, and you know, we gotta move ahead. You know what I'm saying? Like Fugazi, it's like the ultimate like what even is that band? You know what I mean? Like it's like, you know, it like it's so free. You know what I mean? It's so free, and so many of those other people from that sort of hardcore era, it's like 40 years later, they're kind of still just in that.
Yeah, they haven't grown.
Yeah, you know what I'm saying? And like so I find that inspiring, where it's like these people like who are like, and it's really rare, people who can really like make a mark in multiple different.
Yeah,
You
I
know,
love the
areas.
records, but I love the records he still put. The Evans records, like the more sparse, like melodic, are like
Oh,
I
yeah.
love those records.
Yeah,
Mhm.
just awesome. Yeah, and I mean, he's clearly just like, yeah, super engaged. Like that new project he's got, this Koriki thing.
Yeah,
Like, yeah, I don't know. I guess I was just trying to like tie a thread together between all this different stuff that might seem different, but to me, I just don't. I'm just looking for something that feels like very, like you said, just feels true to me, and not making like a value judgment about anyone else's taste, but just like what I don't know. There's some common root thing that I'm looking for, and that kind of relates to this podcast, this Heavy Metal Bebop thing that we talked about. Yeah.
So, and we're going to get into that, but Hank, how old were you when you discovered Ween? Like, where were you in your life?
I was let's see, it would have been Pure Guava, which I think maybe came out in 92.
Yeah, 91, 92, yeah.
Yeah, so I was about 14. My friend, like real close friend of mine then, and you know, we're not as close now, but just sort of like we were sort of bonded for life because of our, you know, common adolescence. My friend Adam Galblum, he had the Pure Guava CD, and it was also around the time when weed was sort of coming into the picture for our group of friends. Like you know, it was like,
that all checks out.
yeah, Adam had a unique, well, I don't really want to get too into it, but let's just say that at his house things were a little bit less supervised than they were at mine.
Yeah.
There's always that one basement. There's some kids got the basement that no one.
Well, it was, in this case, it was the upstairs.
Yeah, right.
But yeah, it was for all intents and purposes that. But I guess what I mean to say is that it was, you know, that was possible. It was possible to go up there and have this sort of like, I almost feel like I had like what would have been like not that different than like someone's experience in like the late 60s or early 70s, when you're just kind of sitting around stoned listening to music, which
and then White Rabbit comes on.
Yeah, well, that's what I'm saying. It's like it like this was happening in 1992, but it's probably not that different than what my parents were experiencing, you know, in college in like 1970 or something like that. Like, you know, it was very innocent. It was like we would sit up in his room and we would play Mortal Kombat 2, and we would smoke weed, and we would have Pure Guava on. And at first,
I want to go there too. Like I want to hang out with that.
Yeah, it was just kind of like, what better way to discover Ween? What better way to discover pot? You know, it was just like, we were just, you know, and I distinctly remember that the Stallion Part 3 was, sorry, I was looking at this question over here. Is that Wolves in the Throne Room that the person's asking about? WITTR. I think it's Wolves in the Throne Room. I do like them, but I don't know them as well, and I'm not as versed in the black metal scene. But yes, cool band for sure. Anyway, sorry. Yeah, so Stallion Part 3. That what I have a distinct memory of that. You know, obviously the iconic moment of the hey dude, he's a stallion, or yo dude,
yeah.
He's the stallion. Yeah.
Just the like when you're 14 and you're high and you're with your friends and you hear that like it was just like you know, I've laughed very hard in my life many times in many circumstances, but it's hard to put into words how hard we were laughing at that. My friend Adam would mouth it out when it was, kept rewinding it, and hey dude, you know, he would kind of act it out. And I mean, it just like the like hilarity of that in that setting. I will probably never forget that. You know what I mean? It was just like,
what a great memory to have forever.
Yeah, like we were, you know, we were just high, and we were listening to Ween, and we were probably just doing not that different than what Aaron and Mickey were doing when they made it, which is just like making each other laugh.
Yeah.
Just kind of wasting time, fucking around, you know, and you know, the truth of the matter is like I remember seeing Push the Little Daisies like on MTV and stuff like that. But at the time when I was a kid, like that, it was really pure guava. You know what I mean? Like I had it and I was into it, but I was real stuck in this metal thing. I was very serious and kind of into this like darker, like Ween was kind of like we would get high and listen to that, but I wasn't like I didn't go all the way into it then. You know what I mean? Like I didn't have like the mollusk. I did buy Chocolate and Cheese when it came out, but I don't think at the time I don't think I bought the mollusk during the later ones. And I think that I only caught up with that stuff later. So there were these multiple phases, but that was the phase one was definitely like getting high, listening to Pure Guava, laughing our asses off at the Stallion Part 3. Like that was
the key is like some of those great memories are with a friend, and like when you could make like a bit of a song, like an inside joke.
Oh yeah.
Especially between like two dudes, like there's nothing like tighter than that kind of moment.
Well, because that's like the moment when your like DNA is being formed in terms of like your tastes and your, just your excitement about music and your, it's just like you're so impressionable at that time. And again, like they always say, I just feel like so many of my tastes and values in terms of what I look for and, music and things like that, so much of that was imprinted between like 14 and 16, all that stuff, the kind of the Metallica and all the death metal stuff, like that's all happening between like 13 and 16,
Yeah, they say like you finish your taste by the time you're like 23. It's like 14 to 23. And then and that sets you up for life on what you I definitely move into new areas, but there's a core of that that's just never going to change. You know what I mean? Like I can't pretend that, I grew up, a different way. You know what I'm saying? Like I'm always going to be oriented towards the like I said, like I want to hear. I'm really into like I want to hear a drummer and a bass player and a guitar player. Like that's just how that's just like how it all came together for me. So I'll extend from there, but I'm always going to have that kind of baseline. Well, Hank, let's jump into the book. There's your first line of the book right there. How did you become the guy that wrote the Chocolate and Cheese book? Did you pitch it? Did someone seek you out? How does that work?
Well, yeah. Just to be clear, the 33 and a third books, which I parenthetically, I believe there's a call out for pitches now if people are interested in that and delving into that series. But the way the series works is pretty simple. They just have these open calls for pitches, and it's basically just like the process I think changes each time, but essentially it's basically just like write us a proposal saying like what album you want to write about. What approach you would take to it, and if you've read any of the other ones, almost every single one has a different kind of like approach. Some of them are almost more like little memoirs. I think John Darnielle even did one that was.
That's the one that always sticks out to me. That's it's really like such an incredible piece of writing, and no surprise that he would go on to write the books that he would
totally.
Write. But that one blew because I probably read yours. Yours was probably the first one I read. And I love the Ween book. I've read other ones that I just didn't really like. I don't want to talk shit, but the Fear of Music one, like I didn't connect with as much. I mean, so they're really different. They're all just.
And I'm not going to sit here and pretend I've read them all. I probably read like 10 or 15 of them or something.
Yeah.
My
Will's read them all.
Yeah, this is my library.
Nice.
Just every single one.
Yeah, my friend Chris Weingarten wrote a great one about Public Enemy, and I'm not a hip hop expert, but he went in there and like broke down every sample that they use in creating that album.
Cool. I have the In on the Kill Taker with me actually. I've never read it.
I checked out. Yeah, that one's really cool too. He did some Joe Gross did some great interviews with Fugazi. That was fascinating. And the one that I've read like multiple times is the Slint Spiderland one.
Oh, nice.
That is like a real favorite album of mine. And Scott Tennant, that writer, he did some really cool stuff there. He really excavated a lot of like, because they did make a Slint documentary a few years after that, but Scott really sort of like he went a little deeper into their history than had ever been, because when I was growing up, Slint was a very mysterious band. It was hard to find information about.
Well, they kind of fit into that, what you were, in a lot of ways, I feel like they fit into what you were describing earlier.
Yeah, 100%. Slint was huge
Dave
for
Pajo
me.
seems Dave. I don't know, is that how you pronounce his name? Pajo. He seems to be, he seems to be doing well. Like I follow him on Instagram, and he's doing all these duets, and he did one with like he's doing them. His voice sounds incredible at this point.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
yeah.
I think he's kind of bouncing back, yeah, which is
Yeah.
great to see. But yeah, yeah. So the 33 thirds are, everyone kind of has its own approach, and you know, I intend to read more, but you know, I've only read the ones I've read. But you know, so basically, you know, you need to pitch them. You need to be like, this is the approach I would take to this record. Here's, you know, at the time I did it, it was kind of like, why do you think people will buy this? You know, there's kind of just a multi-layered, like, and I think that the year prior, or the prior call for pitches, I pitched a Rush album. Rush is one of my, if not my favorite band, and that, you know, that pitch they passed on. And you know, I think after they passed on that, I started to think about, you know, what would make sense here, like what you know, what you know, and I started to think a lot about like the Ween fan community, and just how the passionate, you know, the super passionate fans. And like I, you know, as I sort of had said, I'd gotten more into, I'd sort of filled in the gaps with Ween thanks to like some college friends. My friend Zach Waldman, who grew up in the New Hope area and was a super Ween fan, and we started playing music together in college. And I really caught up on like White Pepper and Mollusk and the Country Record and all that stuff. So I sort of filled in the gaps by then, and I, you know, I had a real fondness for Ween. And I don't know, something, you know, people were pitching a lot of stuff like, you know, super canonical classic rock, classic indie rock, super like cool rock critic type records, you know, which I like a lot of those records, but I didn't feel like I had anything to say about some of the more canonical stuff. I think as a writer, I kind of try to go where everyone isn't, you know, like if enough people are on a topic, I'm like, they got that covered, and that's great, you know. But I kind of try to find the place to dig where maybe I could just kind of quietly occupy a little territory off to the side. You know, I'm not necessarily going after the right down the center, you know, try to interview Kanye or Taylor Swift or something like that. Like, you know, again, like it's not anything against it. It's just like, you have to go where your passion is. That's where your best work is going to take place. You know what I mean?
So they accepted the pitch. They loved the pitch, and they were like, "Yeah, write it."
Yeah, I mean, I presumably, I mean, you know, again, like I think there was a couple of email. They were like, "Oh, well, you made this cut, and then you made this cut." There were, you know, and then yeah, they eventually, I got an email that was like, "We want to do this." I think there were like 10 others or something around, like each time it comes in like waves, there'll be like 10 or 15 of them. So they accepted the pitch, and a big part of my pitch was that I wanted to, you know, whenever I do projects like this, my goal is always to talk to as many of the participants as I can talk to. Like I always want to do it like documentary style. All due respect to the way that other people have approached these books. People have done all different ways, but I am always, you know, if my view is, if the person that I'm writing about is alive, I want to talk about, you know, I you know, their take, I want their take to be at the center of it, and I can kind of fill in the narrative. But I really want to, like a documentary or something, you know, like
Hank, it's been an amazing resource for this podcast alone, just to be able to find the stories of how Candy, you know, came about. Like we just talked about that, I don't know, like 4 or 5 episodes ago.
Yeah.
It's like, because they seem to be a quiet, elusive band who likes the story that they created for themselves and just let, you know, people's imaginations run with it. So it was nice to get a bit of truth, or as much truth as they wanted to give you.
Well, I will say that, you know, for whatever like information of value that's in there, like I would credit it like 75% to Mickey. He and I had like an initial meeting, and I think he wasn't quite sure about the whole thing, and wasn't quite sure, you know, he's kind of like, who is this guy, and blah blah blah. And there was a little bit of like getting to know one another at the beginning, and this was through also super helpful guy Greg Fry, who was the manager at the time. But eventually, you know, Mickey did kind of come around, and he was extremely generous with his time. Like we did like, you know, 2 or 3 hour phone calls, like several of those, and it was really just like, once it got to the songs, it was just like every song, it was like, all right, let's move on to the next song, move to the next song. He gave me the whole backbone of the book was talking to him. You know what I mean? As anyone who's seen his interviews or talked to him, he's absolutely hilarious. He's super unguarded. He's just like a guy you want to listen to talk. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like as much as he's like mainly the guitar player in Ween, he's also kind of like in a way, he's kind of like the mouthpiece and the almost like the mascot of Ween. He's
like,
the
balls.
Yeah,
he's the balls,
right.
Hank.
Yeah, it's kind of like, yeah, again, Greg helped me out, getting to Mickey, and then and Aaron, we did all those interviews over email, but he gave me really extensive answers and a lot to work with there. Another guy who was super helpful was Andrew Weiss, who's in a way, kind of the third core member, and like a longtime producer, and who I was also a big fan of because he played bass in Rollins' band and Gone, which was the Greg Ginn instrumental band after Black Flag. But Andrew Weiss, I went over to his house, and he was just hilarious and just really down to hang out and talk. And then, I think I just went down the liner notes and tracked down everyone that was in there. There was, Claude. This was the first Ween record that Claude appears on, a couple tracks. So we talked.
Yeah, Claude had some amazing quotes in that book.
Yeah, he was super fun. And then like this guy, Stefan Said, who I don't have the credits right in front of me. I think he maybe plays on Buenos Tardes or something like that.
He was like the flamenco guitar on that song.
Yeah, something like that. I'm trying to, and Pat Fry, who was Greg Fry's wife, who played drums on Baby Bitch, and then there's a couple other little like bit player, and then also Danny Clinch, who's like the great rock photographer who took the beautiful portraits on the inside of them like fishing and stuff like that. I talked to like the designer who designed the cover, the guy who made the belt, and
I love that shit. I love that there's where this belt. The story of this belt.
The story of the belt, and also the story of some of the outtakes for the photographer I talked to, and in the end, as I was very upfront about, the white whale is the model on the cover. I was never able to locate her, and that was through through putting out calls on the internet and stuff, being like, hey, if anyone knows, and I got like I feel like I got like one person away, but Ashley Savage, kind of a generic name. Nobody really knew if it was her real name. She has like an IMDb page, and she was apparently in this there's this weird kind of like SNL
episode or something. Yeah,
it's this guy did like a Seinfeld parody, and he's playing Kramer, and there's like a diner scene, and the waitress is apparently Ashley Savage, the same one. But I just, it's one of those things where it's like, if you're trying to track someone down who with a fairly generic name, and you don't really have leads, that so that was.
I don't think that's her real name. I think that's a fake name.
Probably not. Yeah. So I mean, that's the one thing. Like I just kind of wonder if she'll ever, pop up and do an interview about that. I mean, it probably was just another job. Probably not that memorable for her.
And yet she was voted, was it Playboy Magazine's sexiest album cover of all time?
I think it was.
It was an internet poll, so.
Yeah. but yeah, I think
besides, the internet poll.
Yeah.
I think besides Ashley Savage, I think pretty much everyone who had either played on the record or who had anything to do with it. I was, another key guy was Dave Ayers, who was their either their manager or he was their A&R. I can't remember if he was their A&R or their manager, but he was the guy who facilitated the Elektra deal. And he was just so great, so funny, and just really a lot of the inner workings of how a band like Ween would have even got. And I also talked to Steve Ralbowski, who was the guy at the label, who I think also ended up signing the Strokes. He was a big deal.
Yeah.
Tomato talked about that guy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it was
I
really
think it was cool
interesting,
as
like
shit.
learning about their intersection with this, this major label world. And, as Ayers said, I think one of my favorite quotes in the book is when he says something like, they got like $300,000 per album by just like turning over stuff they made on a 4-track, like Pure Guava. It was just like they just made the stuff like in the shack, in the pod that they were working in. And Andrew Weiss would mix these 4-track tapes and they would hand it over, and that was a record. And so a lot of what I was writing about was this period where, Chocolate and Cheese, obviously they're kind of like stepping it up a little bit, and they're moving into, it all becomes a little more hi-fi. Like something like Freedom of 76 was like very different than, but again, it's kind of weird because, as Mickey pointed out, like, the first Ween album has all live drums,
Right.
like Mickey plays drums on God Ween Satan. So there is a precedent for them having like a full, and some songs on that record kind of end up sounding, more hi-fi than Pure Guava and the Pod.
Yeah.
But I was trying to kind of draw that distinction between, if Ween is now a band that you go see like at major, you go see them at like Red Rocks, and they're like this huge, like hi-fi, like world-class rock band. I was like, how do we get from this like stoner 4-track thing to that? And to me, like Chocolate and Cheese was where that.
Do you go to shows?
Do I now?
Yeah. Or when was the first time you saw Ween?
I think I saw Ween. I believe I saw Ween maybe like first time like late high school. I think I did go see them then. And then I saw them in New York several times. Like I went to like a summer stage show. And when I was writing the book, I did go to a couple consecutive shows. I went to Denver. I did see a Red Rock show because I wanted to see them kind of in the full glory. And I saw them in like Albuquerque or something. I mean, but again, I just want to stress, like, there was this, I think we were talking beforehand of like my level of Ween fandom, like love the band, but I'm not going to sit here and pretend I've been to 40 Ween shows. I've been to probably 10,
Right.
I've been to probably 10, I love the band, but I'm not, I have not like followed Ween on tour or something like that, like, so I think when you're talking about a band where the fans are this passionate, you kind of have to like give a caveat about your own.
That you're not a real fan.
Well,
you're not.
That's what I'm saying. I'm saying to certain people who are, it's just like the Dead or Fish or whatever. Like when we're talking about these communities, it's like some people might say that I'm not. You know what I mean? But again, I tried to get as much of the story as I could from the people who made it, and just filling in whatever I could fill in that would be helpful. I mean, when I read the reviews of the book, a lot of people they seem to like the quotes, and they're like, oh, I don't know about the writing. I mean, again, we're talking about this is the first time I'd ever done a project of this length, 33 1/3. At that time, at least, it was, I was kind of just taking a shot in the dark at this, and just like I just kept writing till I finished. And that was.
Were you already at Rolling Stone at this point?
No. I was at Time Out New York at that time. So after college, I had sort of kicked around, done some different jobs, freelance, temped for a while, then I got a job at Time Out New York, and then I was eventually there for about 10 years working in different capacities, copy editing, but then eventually full-time in the music department and the music editor at Time Out. So it was written while I was working there, really just kind of getting up early in the morning and working on the weekends, and just entirely outside the.
I have just like a business question. How did the book sell? Did it do well? How does that work?
I don't have numbers, but I mean, I still do get, occasional modest royalty checks from it. So I think people still buy it. I mean, I think and Ween actually at the time, they bought a lot of them and were selling them on their own site. And I think at shows. So they got on board with it, and they were helping to, and a couple years ago, Mickey was doing a thing where he was like auctioning off some memorabilia. He had like a little gallery show, and he, I brought him some copies there that he sold. So, they've helped, it's not like a authorized biography, but they did get behind it. And, at least I heard from Mickey that he was happy enough with it that they were willing to
bring it around.
Yeah.
Well, that's good that there was no bad blood after the book came out.
Not
Was it like
whatsoever.
a
Not
tell-all?
whatsoever.
Yeah.
In fact, like I was able to through that friend Zach I was talking about, I was able to he was visiting his parents and I went up there and I did like a little in-store thing at this bookstore in New Hope. And the next night or something, we were like, you know, Zach, you know, obviously there's this, you know, mythos around John and Peter's, you know, the bar they always play at. And like, I mean, it was, you know, Zach's like, you know, and we'll go to John and Peter's, and we did, and Mickey was sitting there. He was just in a booth at John and Peter. I mean, it was almost comical because like, you know, these artists get associated. You know, it's not like you walk into like Cafe Wah and like Bob Dylan is still sitting there. You know what I'm saying? Like, but you know, but like he was there. And you know, and again, like I said, I had met him, but most of our interviews for the book were over the phone. And so I just kind of went up to him and I was like, hey, you know, Mickey, like I'm the guy. Yeah. And remember when we were doing those interviews, this is that book. And I handed it to him and he kind of was like polite, but I had no idea if he would ever look at it. And you know, he eventually did read it and he did reach out and say that he was, you know, appreciative. He said, in so many words, he said that he was skeptical of the idea at first of there even needing to be a book, but that when he read it, he was happy and felt he was just happy that it existed. You know what I mean? And that meant a lot to me that he read it and that he said that, and again that Ween kind of like, as much as they could, kind of got on board with it and helped to bring attention to it. You know, so no, it was fortunately, you know, knock on wood, it was all positive. You know, once it was done, and you know, they were really cool about it. Or Mickey especially.
So Hank, you got some flack for your Stereo Gum article, where you where you rank all your Ween records.
Yeah.
From worst to best.
Yeah.
And what came in last and what came in first?
well, it's
Will Nunziata only
hard hitting
and polls. He's
yeah.
You know,
no. I think I'm happy to talk this stuff out, but I also have there's no sense of this being anything other than my opinion. I mean, like I probably could have been more objective about that thing, but yeah, I put the country album last. I guess because, you know, to me, I guess, you know, I don't know. That's not the Ween album I reach for, you know, and I think people get very attached to the idea of that album, that it being such a cool, fun thing that they did that, which I agree. It is amazing that they did that. And it's awesome. And probably in the years since that, I think this guy's saying, sorry, I'm looking at the chat. Saying,
what Rush album did you want to do?
Oh, it was Moving Pictures, which is not necessarily like my favorite Rush album, but it was the one that made the most sense because it's just kind of the most iconic. So yeah, it was Moving Pictures. What were we talking about? Oh yeah, the rankings. Yeah. So the 12 Golden Country Greats. Yeah, it's just not. It's like song for song, it's not my favorite, or at least it wasn't at the time. But then since then, you know, like Japanese Cowboy. You know, I mean, it's hard to. I mean, there's not a single one of those albums that I don't really like a lot.
If the three of us ranked them, you know, if we did another ranking each now, we would piss off.
What are your guys' best and worst?
So I don't know that I've never done them all the way. You know, I've never really even thought about it that way, but like, I know if I did it, if I said it right now, I'd piss off a certain percentage of Ween fans.
Of course.
If I don't,
just do it.
If I don't listen to I don't, you know, and the thing,
let's do at least best and worst. We got to do favorite and least favorite. Favorite and least favorite.
I'll go first. You want me to go first?
Yeah.
Sure.
Favorite.
I'm going to put Mollusk at number 1.
Okay.
It feels like a complete thought. It changed my life when I heard it. It was just like, wow, what a band. And least favorite, Hank, I'm with you on 12 Golden Country, because anytime I have to write out a list of all the Ween albums, I'm like, wait, I'm missing one. And it's always 12 Golden Country Greats.
Yeah.
It's like the outlier, and I never put it on.
The Mollusk would be up there for me, but just to differentiate myself from Will Nunziata, I'll say Quebec. is my favorite Ween record. And I would say La Cucaracha would be my least favorite Ween.
That's
record.
a
It's
tough one.
got two of my it's got two of my favorite. Object and Your Party are two of my like top.
Your party is unquestionably one of the best Ween songs, which kind of like redeems it. Like for me, like My Own Bare Hands, Your Party,
Yeah.
and like one or two others. But La Cucaracha can be. There's moments of it where I don't know. There's like Woman and Man. I don't know. I mean, so not my favorite, but yeah, like you were
Wait,
saying,
is Blue Balloon on that album?
Blue Balloon is the second. Is it Fiesta and then Blue Balloon?
Yeah.
I mean,
I
you
could
could.
do- I
The
could
thing
do
is, like,
that
what I was
with
gonna say
Blue.
is we piss off people no matter what. Like,
Yeah.
Sure.
But as you were saying, I mean, Hank, you were saying like, you know, you go back and you listen to like the Oneness or even the like, and we've talked about this a lot on the podcast over the 17 years. Like I came to the band a little bit later. Like I definitely knew about Push the Little Daisies, but I never owned Pure Guava when I was younger. I didn't like, I got into it like Chocolate and Cheese is really the record that like made me fall in love with Ween.
Yeah.
And, but then my favorite Ween songs are now songs from the pod and the Oneness and Pure Guava. Like my favorite Ween songs to see live are Frank, Spring Theme, the songs that are songs that don't sound anything when you see them live now with a full band and with Kirk Miller sound and with like the lights and the whole thing.
No,
they
that's
don't
a whole
sound
different
anything
thing.
like they don't sound like they do on the pod. You know, I don't listen to Frank on the pod ever.
Yeah, I like that. I agree with you. I like a lot of that stuff live better than I do the super lo-fi versions. But yeah, like I just like to me like Quebec and White Pepper, like once you get into that era of things, like I feel like it gets away from what like the kind of core Ween obsessive really values about this kind of like Brown concept. But like those albums to me, like I maybe that just speaks to my own taste, but like just the kind of emotional depth of those records, like it's just kind of like it's like whoa, you know what I mean? Like it just gets like so heavy, like emotionally. You know what I mean?
Like you said, you're you know, it's like I have a friend who's a chef and he was talking about wine. He's like, oh, it's always good to eat food from the region where the wine is from, you know, like where the wine is made. And if you're 14 playing Mortal Kombat 2, getting stoned, listening to Pure Guava is a snapshot of like that period of the human experience. Whereas Quebec is a grown man getting fucking divorced, which is much closer to what I am now. I mean, things are all good. Things are fine, but I've been kicked up into the fucking attic. But I mean, it's a different expression of the human experience that means more to me at this point.
Yeah, and we were talking before we started. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, no, I mean, I guess I was just saying like one is not better than the other, but it's just like to see the like, I don't know. I mean, that's the tough thing about Ween, because some people are like, okay, so like the sort of the funny part of Ween is always, it obscures a lot of other things. Like for the people that don't like Ween, the comedy I think really turns them off. For some people that really do like Ween, the comedy they gravitate towards, but it sometimes obscures like the other side of Ween. And I think to me, like Ween is all about this like very strange, like sometimes uncomfortable meshing of those two things. And like this kind of thing where like on Chocolate and Cheese, like going between those moods without really like helping you along at all. It's just like, you're going to have to listen to, you know, the HIV song. I'm blanking on the track listing, but like the HIV song right near, you know, what Dina was talking about, or Baby Bitch or something like that, or like Candy. Like they send you a lot of mixed signals and they don't help you at all to like decode them. You know what I mean?
You're going to get the chocolate and you're also going to get the cheese. Sometimes you don't want them together.
Well, yeah. And I think for a lot of people, the comedy can be a turnoff. The comedy can be like, it can be all they like, you know, but like, I guess to me, like the key to it, like, I think, you know, comedy and music is a whole can of worms because it can like obscure what else is there. You know, I think, you know, me personally, like Zappa is someone I've had a hard time really digging in with because I don't find the funny Zappa funny. you know, so it obscures the other stuff. But that's not to say I like a lot of Zappa, but the Ween stuff that is funny, I do think it's funny. I do, like, for me personally, my own bare hands, I happen to think it's funny. It's just like super over the top.
You're gonna get a master's degree in fucking me. That's like the greatest little like.
But it's
Not a bad line. Not a bad line, Will.
Yeah, it's
fucking
I mean, the idea of a cock professor is just the funniest turn of phrase.
It's also because Mickey he just like lets himself inhabit that character when he's singing it, and just like totally, there's no like, he doesn't break character. He's not like, oh, I'm just kidding. Like he's like, he just is that person when he's delivering that, or like It's Gonna Be a Long Night or some of the other super aggro kind of Ween songs. But I guess what I'm saying is like, Quebec, it's like definitely edging more into the comedy is kind of, you know, moving a little bit away from center stage, and seeping into center stage is like this heavy, I don't know what you want to call it. It's just like some of the greatest.
Most people are not okay.
Exactly. Happy Colored Marbles. Like it's some of the most, like, in terms of this whole like continuum of like psychedelic pop or whatever, you know, stretching from like Floyd to the Beatles to the Flaming Lips to like whatever is the whole tradition of that. Like, I think you could put Quebec, the best moments of Quebec, up against any of that. Like really and truly, like these songs like Tried and True, or like Chocolate Town, a Transdermal Celebration, and the song that the songs towards the end, I mean, to be honest, like I feel like I have to like take a deep breath to even put them on. Like I don't want it, and If You Could Save Yourself, those two songs in particular, like, which are really, when you get down to it, those are really just unfucking believable. Those are really, you know, when you get down to it, those are Aaron songs. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, it's like, you know, you start to see what's really an Aaron song. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And like, because, you know, when you listen to Freeman, you can see that Freeman is in a way a sequel. I almost feel like it's like more a sequel to Quebec. Like, it's like they kind of went in this weird place with Cucaracha. I mean, so if anyone's listening to this, by the way, I don't know how many people are, but if anyone's listening to this and has not heard the Aaron Freeman solo album just called Freeman, like, please listen to that. Because like, honestly, like, it's as I don't think it's an exaggeration to say it's as good as any Ween album. I will come out and say that. I think it is. I agree. You won't hear any arguments from me. I mean,
I think on the podcast we once called the last two tracks of Quebec the Jordan Pippen of the Ween catalog.
Oh God, yeah.
That's topical. That's good and topical. Wait, so the last track is You Could Save Yourself. What's the second to last track?
Argus.
Oh, Argus is okay. Yeah, just oh my God. Yeah.
The last like side D of that record. Is,
oh my God.
Yeah, it's the best.
Jesus Christ. And White. I mean, it starts to go there on White Pepper too. I mean, like She's Your Baby, and Exactly Where I'm At, and you know, White Pepper is really way up there too, because it's just like you play that thing and there's not like a weak moment on that.
No, we talked about it last, you know, the anniversary, the 20th anniversary just came and went. And actually someone, our producer, Mikey, actually wrote a really good article, or just a kind of review and celebration of it. But there was one on Stereo Gum, actually.
I saw that.
The guy who I like that writer actually, but it was interesting because it parallels to like Chocolate and Cheese, about like, you know, some Ween fans being like it being too produced or too stylized or too, for me, it's like White Pepper was the first record I bought in the store the day it came out. Like, there was no, and again, I wasn't listening to Pure Guava, you know, when it came out, but so, you know, I wasn't as brown as some folks were coming up, but you know, for me, it's like when I listen to White Pepper, like I have trouble conceiving any ideas about like authenticity or selling out, or you know, it just is a fucking beautiful record.
It's beautiful.
And you put it up against any Beatles record.
Comedy, the sort like the funny stuff is really funny, but it doesn't like take you out of this kind of like spacey mood of the whole thing. You know, like like even like Bananas and Blow, like it's so well produced and it's so like beautiful
Well,
sounding.
Pandy Fackler comes close.
No way, Will.
Walks the line.
Will.
Walks the line.
Sucking
It's
dicks
real
under the
close.
promenade. Sucking dicks under the promenade is one of the
But
greatest.
but the thing is, like, if they didn't throw that one thing at you that almost spoiled the mood, then it wouldn't be a Ween album. You know what I
Right.
mean?
Then people could fucking complain about selling out.
That's like their signature move is they're always going to put like some like sort of like stink bomb in there that's going to like
it's going to test
like,
you. It'll test you as a fan.
Kill whatever like vibe you're on. They're going to like kill the vibe. You know.
So we're hitting our time. I got one more question, Paul.
Shoot, Will.
Was there like are there any stories that you left out of the book that were cool but that just didn't fit the story you were telling?
That's a good
you can think of.
Question. I'd have to look back through the transcripts. They're probably like swimming around in my hard drive somewhere. I don't remember that anything really funny or cool or interesting was told to me that I did not put in there. I think I probably again like privileged their words over my own, you know, like probably if you look at the word count, like at least half that book is filled up with quotes, which is how I wanted it to be.
Right.
I do not recall anything that like made me laugh or made me like say holy shit or made me like remark in any way. Like it's definitely, I would say it's definitely in there, you know. I'm sure, you know, almost everything Mickey says is entertaining. So I'm sure there are things in the transcript, but there wasn't like some anecdote or like, oh, I really wish I had included that like episode or something like that. So yeah, I'd have to say
Hank, release the tapes. Just release the Mickey interview.
People are calling for the transcripts.
Yeah.
They're sitting under my
people want it.
I'm
gonna file a Freedom of Information Act to get
Freedom of 76 Information Act.
Hank, thanks so much, man, for spending time with us.
Man, thank you so much.
Thank you guys. I really appreciate it. It's just nice to have like a, you know, a non-quarantine related conversation.
And I didn't get to any of my questions about Rolling Stone, but very quickly, is it anything like the film Almost Famous? Is your life anything like that movie?
I don't think so. No, it's, you know.
He's not fucking 12, Will.
Looks like he's got a baby face.
It's not like Almost Famous. It's great though. It's really cool. I mean, you know, my byline's there, and you know, I'm mainly an editor, but I write as much as I can, so you can find my stuff there. And also that I plugged the podcast before, but Heavy Metal Bebop.
Yeah, let's talk about it. Talk about it.
Yeah, let's talk about
it.
We got God, producer Mike.
Talk about
I was talking before about that whole intersection of jazz and metal thing, or kind of, you know, finding continuity between genres, and that particular overlap has always been interesting to me because I've been a huge fan of both those styles of music. So it's a podcast about the kind of the weird overlaps and kind of, you know, how one influences the other. You know, for example, I had Bill Ward from Black Sabbath talking about how he, you know, basically his entire childhood was, you know, influenced by jazz, and that's how he got his start as a drummer, is imitating Gene Krupa. And I talked to Jan Hammer, who was in the Mahavishnu Orchestra, who sort of was like one of the prototypical, like bringing heavy rock and like high level jazz together. And, you know, there's a lot of younger musicians in Brooklyn and around here these days who are like, you know, like death metal bands who improvise, or, you know, just like looking for these, there's kind of like 50 years worth of this weird intersection between jazz and heavy metal. And I've tried to like explore that in different ways.
That's amazing. You know? I gotta check it out. The like instrument soundtrack is a jazz record. Like, and I've never really, you know, like I never thought of it as a jazz record.
Well, and now they've got I saw the Mesthetics play at a jazz festival with a jazz saxophone player, and that guitar player Anthony Pirog that they play with is a jazz musician. So yeah, like all, you know, I love all that stuff. And you were talking about Tortoise before. Obviously, there's a lot of crossover there. You know, I'm just kind of interested in those. You know, when people move between those worlds. You know, someone like Vernon Reed, who, you know, has been on the podcast as well. You know,
that's an amazing episode. Voice of God again brings you straight into Decoding Society with Ronald Shannon Jackson. That is wild stuff.
Hell yeah. Hell
the podcast is Heavy Metal Bebop.
Yeah.
The interviewer is Hank Shteamer. Check it out wherever podcasts are good.
I think it's wherever they are. Yeah, it's on Apple and wherever else, Spotify. Yeah. So
Yeah.
All right, well, I'll be over to finish the puzzle, and we'll listen to
put on some Dead 77.
Yeah.
I appreciate your guys' time. I appreciate your interest and your time. And this book was written like 9 years ago, so it's nice to still be talking about it.
Oh
Yeah,
man,
it's such a
been
resource.
pleasure, dude.
It's such a resource for Ween fans, and I think it's the fact that it exists to capture this. It goes back to what we were talking about kind of throughout, of like what punk is, and like, you know, I oftentimes describe, you know, I interact with various people throughout my life that don't know that, you know, I mentioned that I have a Ween podcast, and they don't know what Ween is, and they're like, "What is it?" I was like, "It's kind of it's a punk band that like kept going." Kept evolving, and now they're everything. I mean, they've kind of
they're right. It's like it's like you can't hear just one song, you can't hear just one album. It's just like this whole weird, like, I don't know. It's like
Chocolate and Cheese is a punk record. I mean, right?
What's that?
Chocolate and Cheese is a punk record.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it's like more punk than most punk, probably, because it's like, you know. But yeah, I think you help. You know. Anyway, this is the book, by the way, which I think this is my only copy. They have it. I think you can get it on Amazon or wherever else. So if you're interested, it's all there.
Hank, we all have the copies, but I'm in quarantine at my in-laws, and I didn't bring it with me. Otherwise, I'd be holding it up right now.
Yeah. Well, so maybe you can get the ebook.
Yeah, it's funny. We're all like quarantined.
Buy the book.
We're all quarantined in different places. None of us are in Brooklyn. We're all like, I don't have my book. Yeah, it's like shit. Mikey,
Mikey's got it. There you go.
Do you usually tape this thing in one room?
Well,
at least the podcast.
Yeah, these YouTube things are all new for quarantine, but yeah, we always record in one. We all live in Brooklyn.
Oh, cool. But me too. So
yeah, we have to come by. Yeah, you can talk to Evan.
Just a bunch of dudes with beards. Just a bunch of dudes with beards in Brooklyn.
We have a lady. There's one lady.
We have a girl.
We have a lady. Thanks, Hank.
Yeah, play us out, Paulie.
Oh shit! Yeah, I did.
You haven't queued up a song?
Get us out of here, Paul.
Yeah. All right. Oh shit!
In the best way.
Nice.
This is not what I meant to play, but we're gonna go with it.
I'm all right with it.
Seems appropriate.
Okay. Yeah.
Heavy Metal Bebop.
All right. See you guys.
Thanks, Hank.
Peace out. Peace.
What you were, you can't be what you were. The time now is running out.
All right,